Have you ever woken up and realized that everything around you doesn't look as clear as it used to? The words on your morning newspaper blur together. Sunlight feels too bright, forcing you to squint. And sometimes, the faces of your loved ones seem hidden behind a thin veil of mist. Many people over 60 believe that's just a normal part of aging, something inevitable. But what if I told you your vision and eyes health can actually improve naturally without medication or surgery? Would you believe it? Researchers in the United States have uncovered a simple yet powerful truth. Certain tiny seeds can nourish your eyes from the inside out, improving blood flow, reducing dryness, and even slowing down macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in older adults. These aren't pills or expensive treatments. They're natural gifts from the earth, everyday foods that might already be sitting in your kitchen. I once heard a 70-year-old woman say, "I thought my eyes would never see clearly again until I started eating this one kind of seed every morning." What gives these small seeds such extraordinary power? And why are so many seniors finding new hope for their vision just by changing one simple habit in their daily routine? In the next few minutes, you'll discover how to improve vision and support your eyes' health naturally, using simple habits that science now calls the miracle of routine. Stay until the end, because the answer might just change the way you see the world, starting today. The beginning of the journey. When I started researching eye health among seniors, I met Margaret, a 68-year-old retired school teacher living in Oregon. She loved reading and gardening, but over the years, both became harder to enjoy. The words on her favorite books turned blurry, her eyes burned in the mornings, and streetlights at night felt painfully bright. Like many other seniors, she thought, "It's just age catching up with me." That was until her doctor warned her that if she didn't change her lifestyle, she might lose part of her vision within a few years. One day, during a community wellness meeting, she heard a friend mention something called seed therapy, a natural way to improve vision and care for eye health through everyday foods. It sounded too simple to be true, but what caught her attention was that this same friend once had the same problem and now could read the morning paper without a magnifying glass. Margaret decided to give it a try. She began adding a handful of seeds to her breakfast, mixing crushed seeds into her afternoon tea, and replacing sugary snacks with salads topped with nuts and grains. Within a few weeks, she noticed a difference. Her eyes weren't as dry, the glare from lights faded, and every evening she could read again before bed, a habit she thought she'd lost forever. What was hiding inside those tiny seeds that could bring her eyesight back to life? Could this be the simplest and most natural way for people over 60 to protect their vision without relying on medication or endless eye drops? The answer, as she would soon learn, lay in science and in the quiet power of nature itself. A new discovery. Margaret recalled that after hearing her friend's advice, she went to a local organic market in Portland, a favorite spot for many Americans, especially seniors who value natural living. There, a young nutritionist guided her through a colorful display of super seeds, explaining that not all seeds are the same. Each one nourishes a different part of the eye and supports its own unique function. The nutritionist told her, "Your eyes are like a small garden. If you don't water and feed them properly, they dry out and fade. But with the right nutrients, they can bloom again." That sentence stayed with her. From that day on, Margaret treated her eyes like a garden that needed daily care. She started by adding sunflower seeds to her morning yogurt, rich in vitamin E, which protects retinal cells from oxidative stress. At lunch, she sprinkled crushed almonds and grape seeds over her salad to boost circulation to the retina. In the afternoon, she drank a warm cup of flaxseed tea, packed with omega-3s that soothe dryness and nourish tear glands. After 3 weeks, she noticed a gentle change.
Her eyes no longer stung when she read. The glare of sunlight was softer, and she could focus for longer periods without strain. Margaret said, "I never thought my body could heal itself like this. I used to believe that only medicine could fix me. But it turns out nature had the cure all along." She wasn't alone. Across the United States, thousands of older adults were discovering the same truth, that improving eyes health and vision doesn't always require prescriptions or surgery. Sometimes it begins with a single habit, one small handful of seeds, each day.
The turning point. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret visited the eye clinic in Eugene for her routine checkup with Dr. Daniel, the ophthalmologist who had been monitoring her condition for 2 years. When he finished examining her eyes, he looked up with a smile. "Margaret," he said, "your results are remarkable. Your vision has stabilized, even improved slightly since your last visit. There's no more sign of chronic dryness?" Margaret smiled back, her eyes brighter and more confident. "I've only been eating a few kinds of seeds," she replied. "I didn't expect them to make this much difference." Dr. Daniel nodded. "It's not surprising at all. The body has an incredible ability to repair itself when we feed it right. Vitamin E, omega-3s, and antioxidants improve circulation, reduce inflammation, and protect retinal cells. That's what true natural eye health is about." That day, Margaret became an inspiration to her friends at the local senior wellness club. Every Saturday, she and her neighbors gathered for what they playfully called the Bright Vision Club, sharing seed-based recipes, brewing chia tea, and making pistachio salads. She told her friends, "We can't turn back time, but we can slow down how fast our eyes age." Her story spread across the Oregon community, and soon more seniors began following her example. People who once accepted poor vision as a fact of aging were now discovering that it was possible to improve vision naturally, not through miracles, but through small, consistent changes. For Dr. Daniel, it was proof of something he had believed all along. When science meets nature, even aging eyes can find a new kind of light. Seeds of science. A few weeks later, Dr. Daniel invited the members of the Bright Vision Club to a small seminar at the local health center. The room was filled with sunlight, and around the table sat seniors holding small jars of their favorite seeds: almonds, chia, flax, and pistachios. It felt less like a lecture and more like a community gathering, full of laughter and curiosity. Dr. Daniel began with a lighthearted question. "How many of you grew up believing that carrots were the only food for good eyesight?" Most of the hands in the room went up. He chuckled. "Carrots are wonderful, but they're not the only heroes. After 20 years in this field, I've seen that patients who eat a diet rich in seeds maintain healthier eyes for much longer. Fewer dry eye issues, fewer cases of macular degeneration." He projected an image of the human retina and pointed to its delicate layers. "Vitamin E from sunflower seeds protects these cells from oxidation," he explained. "Omega-3s from walnuts and flaxseed help the tear glands stay active. And lutein from pistachios filters out blue light, shielding the macula, the very core of your vision." Margaret listened from the front row, her face glowing with recognition. Everything she had experienced over the past few months was now being confirmed by science. When the talk ended, she stood up and said, "I used to think I was too old to improve my vision, but now I see that our eyes can learn to see again as long as we care for them." Her words were met with applause. From that moment on, the Bright Vision Club became more than just a local meetup. It became a movement among seniors across Oregon, spreading the belief that improving eye health naturally isn't only possible, it's empowering. And it all started with one small handful of seeds. The 60-day challenge.
A few days after the seminar, Margaret and her friends decided to take on a challenge, 60 days of what they called the 12 Seeds for Vision program. They wanted to see just how much their eyes could change with consistency. Margaret, ever the meticulous teacher, kept a small notebook she called her eye journal, documenting every meal, every change, every feeling. The first week, the group gathered at Richard's home, a 72-year-old retired postal worker. On his kitchen counter sat a tray filled with colorful seeds, tiny, shiny, fragrant. He laughed, saying, "I used to think peanuts were the only kind of nut worth eating. Turns out I was missing a whole world." Margaret began by introducing the first group, the antioxidant seeds, the body's natural defenders against vision decline. They started with sunflower seeds, rich in vitamin E to protect the retina from oxidative damage. Each morning, they sprinkled a spoonful over oatmeal or yogurt. After a week, Richard noticed that sunlight didn't sting his eyes the way it used to. Next came almonds, loaded with alpha-tocopherol, the most absorbable form of vitamin E. Margaret suggested replacing sugary snacks with 20 almonds a day. By week 2, reading or watching TV at night no longer made their eyes ache. Finally, they experimented with grape seeds, often discarded, yet rich in proanthocyanidins that strengthen tiny blood vessels in the eyes. They ground the seeds and blended them into morning smoothies. Surprisingly, the flavor was mild and pleasant. Dr. Daniel monitored their progress closely. After just 3 weeks, he smiled at the results. Even these first 3 seeds are already fighting oxidative stress. Your bodies might age slowly, but your healing is steady, and that's what matters. Encouraged by the results, the group prepared for their next phase, omega-3 rich seeds, the golden nutrients that would help restore moisture and soothe tired, dry eyes, one of the biggest challenges for seniors everywhere. Their journey toward improving vision naturally had only just begun. The omega-3 week. The following week, the group met at Linda's cozy home in Portland. At 65, Linda was a retired accountant who loved reading mystery novels at night. But she often suffered from dry, burning eyes and headaches after long hours of reading. That's why she was especially excited about the week's focus, omega-3 seeds, which Dr. Daniel called the nutrients that soften the light. The kitchen smelled of baked oats and freshly brewed coffee. On the table sat 3 types of seeds, flaxseed, chia, and walnuts, the stars of natural eye moisture and anti-inflammation. Margaret explained from Dr. Daniel's notes. Flax seeds contain alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 that reduces inflammation and helps your tear glands work better. But you need to grind them before eating, or they'll pass right through your system. She scooped a spoonful of ground flaxseed into her yogurt and stirred. It's light, nutty, and easy to eat, she said. Then came chia seeds, which Richard jokingly called the shape-shifting seeds. When soaked in water, they formed a gel-like texture. It keeps moisture in your body, and that includes your eyes, he said. They mixed chia with almond milk and honey to make a soft pudding-like breakfast that everyone enjoyed. Finally, it was time for walnuts, the brain and eye buddies, as Dr. Daniel called them. The omega-3s in walnuts not only fight inflammation, but also improve blood flow to the retina. Linda smiled. "Now I have a reason to eat a handful every day," she laughed. After 2 weeks, the changes were clear. Linda's eyes no longer burned after reading. Richard said he could see better at night while driving. And Margaret, who tended her garden each morning, noticed her eyes weren't red or tired when the sun rose. Dr. Daniel recorded their progress and said, "The eyes don't just need rest, they need nourishment. Omega-3s are like oil for the engine of your vision." The group was more motivated than ever. Their belief in natural eye health had turned into living proof. Next week, they would explore another secret from nature, the seeds that act like natural sunglasses, protecting their vision from the harsh blue light of the modern world.
The natural sunglasses. The next gathering took place at the small community library on the edge of Eugene, where sunlight streamed softly through tall glass windows. It was the perfect place to talk about the next group of seeds, those that protect the macula, the central part of the retina that allows people to see fine details and color. Dr. Daniel called them the natural sunglasses for the eyes. Margaret began the session by saying, "We live in a world surrounded by blue light from phones, televisions, and computer screens. That light slowly damages the macula, the part of the eye that lets us read, recognize faces, and see the beauty in things." Dr. Daniel brought a plastic model of the human eye and pointed to its center. "This," he said, "is your macula, the lens of your inner camera. If it weakens, images blur, lines warp, and colors fade. But nature gave us two powerful pigments, lutein and zeaxanthin, found in certain seeds that can filter blue light just like sunglasses." The group began their tasting session with pistachios, small green gems that smelled sweet and nutty. Richard cracked one open and laughed. "I never thought a snack could be better for my eyes than carrots," he said. Linda agreed. "They're crunchy, easy to eat, and I can see myself replacing cookies with these." Next came fennel seeds, long used in Mediterranean and Indian cultures to freshen breath and aid digestion. Margaret brewed a pot of fennel tea, and its warm aroma filled the room. "It's calming," she said, handing out cups. "It soothes the eyes and relaxes the body." They sipped quietly, the moment feeling almost ceremonial, a small act of gratitude for the simple power of plants. A week later, Linda messaged the group, "My eyes don't ache after working on my laptop anymore. Maybe these really are nature's sunglasses." Richard chimed in, "The colors on my TV look clearer and sharper." Dr. Daniel wrote in his notes, "Lutein and zeaxanthin not only protect the retina, but improve light sensitivity and color contrast." As the meeting ended, the group lingered by the windows. Sunlight danced across their faces, reflecting in their bright, steady eyes. Next week, they would dive into the zinc-rich seeds, the ones that strengthen night vision and protect the retina from UV damage. Their journey toward brighter, healthier vision was glowing stronger than ever. The Guardians of the Night. A week later, the Bright Vision Club met at a small riverside church along the Willamette River, a favorite gathering spot for their monthly wellness talks. That morning, sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting soft colors across the room. Margaret placed two bowls on the table, one filled with pumpkin seeds, the other with cashews. "These," she said, "are our zinc-rich seeds and night guardians of the eyes." She explained that zinc works like a key, unlocking vitamin A so the body can produce the pigment that allows us to see in low light. Dr. Daniel nodded. "In older adults, zinc levels drop over time. That's why many people find it hard to drive at night or adjust to dim lighting." Richard raised his hand. "I used to pull over when driving after sunset because the headlights were too blinding. But after eating pumpkin seeds for about a month, I can finally see the road clearly again." Linda smiled.
I prefer cashews. They're creamy, slightly sweet, and easy to mix into breakfast. I toast them lightly and sprinkle them over my oatmeal. It's delicious and helps my eyes. That day, they tried a new recipe Margaret found on a Latino American cooking show, the Bright Vision Trail Mix, a blend of pumpkin seeds, cashews, walnuts, and raisins. Everyone packed a small bag to take home, replacing chips and cookies with their homemade eye snack. Margaret said, "Each handful is a dose of nature's medicine for your vision and eyes' health." As the group shared stories, the room filled with laughter and light. Margaret looked around and noticed how different everyone seemed. Less weary, more alive, their eyes glowing with quiet confidence. Dr. Daniel closed the session with a smile. Zinc not only strengthens night vision, but also helps repair retinal tissue. It's proof that improving vision naturally starts with what we eat, not what we fear losing. He paused and added, "Sometimes the smallest habits, like a handful of seeds, help us hold on to the most precious thing of all, the ability to see the world clearly." Next week, they would explore the final group of seeds, the ones that support circulation and protect the optic nerve, the highway of light connecting the eyes to the mind. The journey wasn't over yet, but the light ahead was already shining brighter.
The flow of light. The final week of their journey arrived. The Bright Vision Club gathered at the community park by the river, where maple leaves glowed golden under the autumn sun. Margaret brought 2 small jars, one filled with black sesame seeds and the other with hemp seeds. "These," she said gently, "are for blood flow and the optic nerve, the bridge between what we see and what we remember." Dr. Daniel nodded. "Your retina and optic nerve depend on good circulation. When blood flow slows, the nerve weakens and vision fades. But black sesame and hemp seeds are like the body's natural repair crew. They keep the blood moving and protect the delicate nerve fibers that carry light to the brain." That morning, Linda prepared something special, a warm bowl of black sesame porridge, a recipe passed down from her daughter-in-law's Asian family. The aroma was nutty and comforting. Richard took a bite and laughed. Who knew something this good could also be medicine? Dr. Daniel explained that black sesame contains sesamin and vitamin B1, which improve microcirculation, while hemp seeds provide GLA, a rare anti-inflammatory omega-6 that supports the optic nerve. Together, he said, they don't just help your eyes see better, they help your whole nervous system relax. 2 weeks later, the results spoke for themselves. Richard said his sleep was deeper and his eyes no longer felt strained in the mornings. Linda could sew in the evening without turning on an extra light. And Margaret, the one who began this journey with dry, blurry eyes, now stood in her garden, amazed that she could once again see every petal of her roses clearly. She wrote in her eye journal, "My eyes no longer just see, they appreciate. I see the world more clearly, but I also see the beauty I once took for granted." That afternoon, the group sat beneath the maple trees, sipping fennel tea and sharing stories. No one talked about age or weakness, only laughter, calm, and gratitude. Dr. Daniel looked at them and said softly, "When you nourish your body with nature, you don't just improve your vision, you awaken your spirit. Every cell, every glance, every moment is proof that the body still wants to heal if you simply give it the chance." And as the sun dipped low, the river shimmered in golden light, a reflection of the quiet strength in their eyes.
Their 60-day journey was ending, but the light they had found was only beginning.
The gift of clarity. 2 months had passed since the Bright Vision Club began their journey. On the final afternoon, they gathered at a small cafe inside the community garden, the same place where they often stopped after their morning walks. Sunlight filtered through the vines overhead, painting warm patterns on their faces. On the table were glasses of seed smoothies and small bags of their homemade trail mix for the eyes. Margaret opened her worn eye journal, the pages filled with notes and small reflections. Her voice trembled slightly as she read aloud. "The first day, I had to use a magnifying glass just to read the labels on these seeds. Today, I can read every word without help. But more than that, I feel alive again, happier, more grateful." Dr. Daniel smiled as he looked around the table. There they were, once worried, now glowing with calm confidence. He said, "You've all rediscovered what medicine alone can't always give. Trust in your body's ability to heal. A handful of seeds a day might not make you young again, but it can help you see life more clearly, in every sense of the word." Richard shared that he no longer depended on his eye drops as much and that his blood pressure had improved. Linda said preparing her morning seed blend had become a joyful ritual, one that gave her purpose each day. "I'm not afraid of the light anymore," she said, smiling. As the sun began to set, the group stood together, looking out at the golden river. The world shimmered, brighter, softer, more alive than before. Margaret whispered, "Maybe this is the real reward, being able to see what we love clearly again." Before leaving, Dr. Daniel reminded them, "Keep this habit alive. One handful of seeds a day, it's the smallest gift, but the one that lasts the longest." They left the cafe, laughter echoing under the fading sky. Each carried a small bag of seeds in their hand and a quiet light in their eyes. The Bright Vision Club had begun as a small group, but now it was something bigger. A reminder that healing is always possible, and nature still holds the simplest miracles. In her final journal entry, Margaret wrote, "I didn't just improve my vision, I learned to see life again. Clearly, gently, and with gratitude."